Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Jeannie Zaemes, and I'm Director of Growth Marketing at Alchemer. I'm very excited to be joined by our panelists and my colleagues, Alli Milne and Jon Wood. Alli is the Manager of Digital Learning Content at Alchemer. Alli leads the Alchemer University program, and she and her team are very focused on providing relevant digital content and training for our customers. Just since I've been with the company, she has grown Alchemer University substantially, and her perspectives on customer experience are both unique and insightful. Jon is the manager of our onboarding program at Alchemer. In that role, he leads his team to make sure customers have a comprehensive implementation and onboarding experience. I love hearing him talk about their interactions with new customers and describing how they work to make sure customers start their journeys with Alchemer on the right path. We will have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. If you have any questions, please submit them via the portal at any time throughout the webinar. Our webinar today is focused on maximizing the value of your customer experience or CX program. CX programs truly offer the potential for long-term ROI directly tied to improved levels of satisfaction, loyalty, advocacy, and retention. However, we often see executives face pressure to justify CX in the short term, possibly at the cost of reducing the necessary focus on the customer. Today, Alli and Jon will share their experience and stories, showing how organizations can truly realize that value from their CX programs. We have a lot of great information to cover, so let's get started. Earlier this year, Alchemer worked directly with Forrester Research on a very compelling CX research paper titled Smoke and Mirrors. A key metric we learned from that report is that only 26% of CX leaders feel they can optimally receive and respond to customer feedback in a timely, efficient manner. That is a pretty low percentage, considering the true importance of understanding and communicating feedback out to the broader audience. Jon, let's start with you. Can you speak to why it is important to realize value from feedback programs, and why do you think so few executives are realizing this value? Jon, I think you may be mute, so I'm going to have you check that. Let's do just a quick test. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can we hear you? I hear you, Alli. And Jon? I tell you what, let's try taking out the earbud or make an adjustment and be on speaker. Let's try again. Good morning, Jon. Oh, we're not hearing Jon at all. I tell you what, we're going to do, I love doing things on the fly. Let's start with Alli. So why don't you start with your piece and let's get Jon functioning.
Absolutely, I'm happy to. And thank you, Jeannie, for getting us started.
Thank you.
Yeah, so your question was, how do executives realize value of your customer experience program? And one thing that we believe in at Alchemer is the ask, act, analyze approach. And so we believe that value doesn't come from a one-time survey, but by creating a continuous loop. It requires an overall strategy that is incorporated into your business objectives and is paved across the nervous system of the company. So it always should start with defining a goal and should continue with taking action. So these processes need to, like I said, start with defining that need or goal. You need to know why you're asking for feedback and what you're going to do with it. And then when you get ready to ask, it's so important to design your survey to collect the most valuable feedback possible. So really structuring them so that they fit your respondents' needs so that they're giving you the feedback that you're looking for. And then you're going to act. So one step that people forget to do is they need to know who's responsible for responding and taking action so that feedback isn't just sitting there. And then finally, you're going to analyze. So it's really important to create detailed reports that help tell your story and provide deeper analysis to inform the action taking. And then after all that is done, then you need to take a look at the process itself. So don't just continuously run the same process over and over. You need to really look at it, check the health of your process, and make sure that it's being effective and that you're getting the feedback you're looking for. And then from there, you're going to iterate and repeat, and it's going to be a continuous cycle so that you're continuously getting the feedback you're looking for.
I think that's pretty important. Especially that this is a process. It's not a start stop. All right, Jon, let's test you again. I still can't hear you. I tell you what, Alli, do you feel comfortable talking through Jon's talking points? Because I can, or if you want to, I think that works. And sorry to our listeners.
No, that's totally fine.
The joys of webinars and Zoom.
Yeah, I might hand that off to you if you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay. We've talked about this quite a bit. Realizing the value really means setting the stage to measure that positive ROI, and it means effective communication to senior stakeholders. Measuring that return means thinking more critically about metrics, including CSAT, loyalty, advocacy, and retention, all of which are critical for customer experience. Customers like to hear when we help them translate CX metrics into financial metrics. They want to hear, hey, what's in it for me? The next step is to realize value, and the value is effectively communicating the plan to senior stakeholders in their language. The executive team needs to know that CX is measurable in metrics that are meaningful to the company and the company bottom line and those overall corporate goals. You also need to realize value to justify the effort that a sustainable and flexible CX program requires. We're not talking about a one-time customer survey that spits out static data. Those are just insights. They're not as valuable as what you could get with a strategic CX program. We found from Gartner that this is a great quote: with a demonstrable, data-driven financial validation for CX, organizations struggle to make the investments necessary to improve customer-centric decision-making and strengthen those customer relationships. Traditional financial metrics don't integrate deeper customer data. On top of that, their ownership is more ambiguous, which compounds the complexity of getting that necessary buy-in from senior executives. Jon, are you?
Hello.
Yay! We have Jon. All right, I'm going to let you take it from there.
Thank you. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. Do you have anything you want to add to those talking points I just went over?
I think that's great. I do want to make sure that we understand that, the flexibility and sustainability of a CX program does require significant investment, and that really is what translates to making sure that we understand the metrics that matter to these senior stakeholders. And as you were starting to say, we're not talking about just this one-time customer survey that spits out static data, but we're really talking about here something that we heard from Gartner too, which without this demonstrable data-driven financial validation, organizations are really starting to struggle to understand the investments they're making, and they need to be more customer-centric in their decision-making to strengthen those relationships that are so critical. So, one layer on top of that is just that the ownership of the metrics is still somewhat ambiguous. And what we're seeing now is that it really compounds the complexity of getting that necessary buy-in from these senior stakeholders.
That's great. And I'm glad you're with us now. Jon's got a ton of insight. I think what I'd like to do now, Alli, I know you've got a great case study with Product Madness. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. And it speaks exactly to what Jon was just talking about that customer centricity. So Product Madness is one of our customers who's an international gaming company, and they have a customer experience program that puts the voice of the gamer right back into their product development. And they do this by embedding their player feedback surveys into their games so that their responses are tied to each player and integrated in with their custom CRM, their player profile database, and then their Slack channel. So it's informed to their entire team. They then take the reports and segment them by player tier and game, allowing them to take specific action targeted to the problem areas. So Product Madness realizes their value from customer feedback in a few ways, and both of them tie back directly to their business objectives. So first, they fulfill their organization's mission of responsible gaming by taking action on feedback from the open text responses that shows the gamer might be addicted. And then second, they improve the retention rates by understanding and addressing the specific needs of each player that they find through their in-depth analysis that's segmented again by player tier and by game.
That is pretty amazing. And I will admit, I have a couple video games I like to play. It's amazing the data that customers who are in touch with the customer experience are able to pull and how they can adjust. Jon, do you have other examples that you've seen?
So we did have this, we had a customer in the consulting and advertising industry, and their challenge was they were looking for a way to retrieve customer satisfaction feedback from a new site design, new website design. The feedback here needed to be reported on to send to the website developers, and then that would then inform them if their feedback was, that would inform them if their site design changes were tracking positively or not. So the solution that we came up together was a scoring index that we created that gauged the positive and negative answers. And the corresponding report calculated the average score and displayed it longitudinally in a line chart. That gave the website developers a quick glance to see how those website changes were producing and affecting feedback. And then the result was that the combination here of the hidden actions, so in this case, calculations that were behind the scenes and end users didn't see, the combination of those actions with flexible reporting created an extremely powerful feedback tool. And it was fully customized to those site developers. And then when a feature was rolled out that customers didn't like, those developers could then quickly gather that data and act on that immediately too.
I love that example. Actually, being in marketing, I even remember when that lead first came in, and I loved the case study or the use case that they had and how they were really looking to engage with their customers. That's an amazing story. But actually, both of those are such good examples. However, I know that there can definitely be hurdles as both, whoops. There we go. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide. No, I was on the right slide to start with. Let's talk a little bit about what some of those common challenges are. And Alli, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Absolutely. So there can be many challenges with, having an effective customer experience program. But one of the biggest challenges is having undefined goals. So not having a defined goal can lead to unusable feedback with minimal business value. Time and again, we hear from customers that say that they're collecting data just to collect data, and they don't really know why. And they don't understand sometimes that this can cause survey fatigue and what we refer to as dirty data. So they end up with all this feedback that they're not really able to use. And in turn, that deters customers from being willing and engaged in providing valuable feedback in the future.
That's such a good point. I know there have been times where there are brands that I'm very loyal to, and they ask me questions all the time, but I don't really see that input ever put to work. And you're just like, I don't need to, address this again. And I think you're absolutely right about undefined goals. That can be such a huge challenge across many initiatives. Jon, what challenges do you see?
I think the biggest bucket of challenges is around scaffolding the CX process or setting it up. And within the context there, I'll talk about the scaffolding and setting it up, the process behind it. Also, this concept of the business lab, which customers really find value in, and also stakeholder management, which of course is going to be key in setting up any sort of process. So within scaffolding, going back to the idea of proving the importance and ROI of CX, is the realization that CX needs to be embedded in the overall company strategy. Also getting quality data. So not just as much as possible, really thinking about quality versus quantity. Many customers there come to us and think they just need and want to collect as much data as possible. So that's somewhat true, but really only to a degree. I'd actually argue that you shouldn't collect more data than you're willing to or capable of acting on. So creating a realistic scope of data collection, that's an important step within scaffolding. And if you think about the last time you filled out a survey about your experience, maybe in store, maybe online, were you confident your voice was really being heard? So, I mean, for me, it was kind of a yes or no. I'm not really sure. If you knew that the company asking you these questions was going to do something about that feedback, you're just going to feel a deeper connection with that company. You're ultimately going to become more loyal, and you may even become a brand champion. And so here's how to support that scaffolding. As you set up your CX process, you also want to make sure you're not reinventing the wheel. You want to get a head start, which is what we help our customers do by gathering the most relevant and impactful guidance and also inspiration from companies that have successfully implemented these programs. We start this session with a strategy lab or strategy workshop, which takes us to the business lab. And here's what that means. It's a 1-hour session to review the project success we've helped the customer achieve up until that point. We want to see how we've helped them accomplish their original business objectives. And then we find inspiration from those case studies from other customers. We consider upcoming business objectives within that team, that department, maybe even organization-wide. And then we map the potential applications from our brainstorm sessions to those opportunities. And the last bucket of challenges within this scaffolding is stakeholder management. So there we really need to consider things like the data pathway when it pertains to stakeholder management, knowing and connecting data to the stakeholders that matter and that are going to action on it. And of course, we need that buy-in from the senior stakeholders. And then measuring the ROI is also closely related to stakeholders because we need to understand the motivations and the KPIs from the senior leaders, and we need to align with them on that. Here's just a quick story on stakeholder management. So we had a customer in a automotive parts providing industry, and they were really caught flat-footed at the beginning of the pandemic. They needed to pivot business models to better understand the customer experience and the customer journey. So the business units here were siloed in a way that e-commerce was its own unit. They recognized the problem. They actually created a new CX department, but they needed guidance on how to connect the data between these previously siloed business units. So what we did here is we flipped it. We wanted to think about this through the customer lens and lead with the customer journey itself. That way we could optimize the path of the customer data, how it was flowing to get to the right people to action on it. And it really worked well.
Those are great points. I love that term, scaffolding. I've been trying to think of ways I can use that in marketing. Let's build on those points a little bit, Jon. When you start building a CX program, what do you think are the first challenges to conquer to kind of pave the way for an effective program?
Yeah, so I'd say there are 3 challenges at first that you definitely want to prioritize. Those are number 1, understanding your business objectives, 2, your stakeholders, and 3, your metrics. So 1, your business objectives. You need to connect to those objectives, which is actually what we do during that business lab. And it also helps us build a relationship with our customers. Speaking of, within stakeholder management, we create a stakeholder map to understand the supporters, the blockers, so the customer really has a thoughtful landscape into who the key players are and understanding what the motivations are of those stakeholders, the with them or the what's in it for me. And then thirdly, measuring metrics. So what they are, aligning on them internally. And one quick example there is our customers tell us they feel like we really hear them when we kick off our onboarding sessions because we really carve out that time to understand the metrics that matter to them. And then we revisit that throughout the onboarding process and then again at the business lab to graduate them from onboarding. And just a quick example about that metrics piece. Some customers are most interested in things like satisfaction scores and TRT or turnaround time. Others are interested in customer engagement, site visits, time spent, maybe even sentiment analysis. So we have to sort of appreciate that some of these are less tangible than others in terms of metrics, and more indirectly tied to revenue, but all of them are drivers to customer retention, customer lifetime value. And these are metrics that the C-suite understands and appreciates, and is also extremely important to sort of translate those metrics in terms of CX into financial metrics that everyone fully understands already.
Those are great points. Alli, I know you've got insight on these initial challenges as well. What are your thoughts from that perspective?
Absolutely. So Jon had the idea of the goals ahead of time, but you also have to worry about the end user experience and the survey design to make sure that you're capturing the right kind of feedback. So you want to think of the better the experience, the more valuable data you will collect. So earlier we spoke about survey fatigue and collecting dirty data. What that means is it's extremely important to design the survey to collect valuable feedback. So you want to consider the question types. You want to apply logic so you're making sure to display the relevant questions to the respondent. And then from there, also select the best distribution method to reach that target audience that you're looking for. You also need to understand the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. So if you're capturing something like NPS metrics, an NPS score is a quantitative metric that provides a data point, but it kind of lacks the why behind it. So it lets you know how you're doing, but adding something like an open text option lets you know the why and how to adjust your program, or I'm sorry, your product. And so carefully designing the survey to improve that user experience will help increase the chances of collecting more valuable and usable data.
That's great. Those are such good points. I know it's interesting with the NPS, and NPS definitely became a pretty big thing years ago. And it's interesting how many companies just publish a NPS, a couple times a year, and everybody nods and says, yes, that's great. But yeah, I think what you talked about and adding that open text field is such a great idea. For our last topic, I'd like to discuss how to turn CX programs into really long-term dynamic initiatives. As you learn from your customers, how do you make sure that success continues? How do you launch, iterate, and scale to ensure your CX strategy adapts to all of the data you start and continue to collect and analyze? Alli, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Awesome. So exactly like you said, these are ongoing programs. Customer experience programs should never remain static. You want to make sure that you build them so that they're able to be flexible and agile and ready to evolve and innovate. If you don't do this, and more often than not, your data is just sitting there in this echo chamber and nothing is happening with it, or you're continuously collecting bad data. So because your process needs to be adjusted. If your process isn't working, then the feedback you're getting isn't working either. So again, you need to make sure that your feedback and the data that you're collecting is delivering value and is used to inform that decision-making. So to do this, it's important to conduct regular assessments of your program and check in on the health of the program. And ways that we do this at Alchemer are we have things like the fall off statistics report. And this report shows you where customers are leaving your feedback survey. Like maybe you're asking too many questions. Maybe you're asking the wrong type of questions and they're getting bored. So you're not collecting the feedback you're looking for. You can also track the locations to see where you're getting the most valuable feedback so that in the future you can adjust your distribution method or your location to ensure that you're targeting the right audience and reaching the audience in their preferred way. So we had a customer one time who was a library organization, and their initiative was they had this project that they were working on, and their goal was to get as much feedback as possible to feed what path they should take with this project. And so they started with a survey that was online, and they realized they weren't getting a lot of responses back. And so with that, they worked with us and we're like, well, who are your respondents? And they were ages of all kinds. And so we worked with them on adjusting their distribution methods. So instead of just having one online survey, we had a paper survey that was posted in the library. We had QR codes where people could scan it. We had a mobile survey that was emailed out, that was texted out. A mobile survey that was texted out that they could respond. So we kind of hit all areas of distribution, and they ended up collecting thousands of responses. That was really valuable feedback that informed the program that they wanted to move forward with. So by looking at their process and adjusting it, they were able to actually improve the value of the feedback they were getting and kind of make changes to their program moving forward. So it's really important to not just let it sit there, but continuously evaluate it and make sure you're making the changes so that you're getting what you need from your customers.
What a great example. And I love that it's a library who is clearly staying modern and adjusting with their readers and the people who use the library. That's a great example. Jon, I know you have a great example as well from the software space.
Yeah, so just a quick story there. We have a customer within software security, and their challenge was they needed to quickly find additional insights on customers who were leaving them feedback. So we gave them the option there to connect their customer reviews to public review sites such as G2, Amazon, etc. But also simultaneously alert their account managers of those dissatisfied responses. So the solution that we co-created in this case was we enabled the customer to streamline the NPS delivery by consolidating multiple product reviews into a single form. Then reports can be sent off to executives to review trends, comments, other data, either by filtering for the product being reviewed or look at NPS as a whole. And we help the customer automate NPS by cleaning up how the feedback was captured. That was really what allowed them to get creative with how to draw insights from this data, make it stickier and also bigger within their organization. And that resulted in creating really a fun idea, which was an NPS council. So the idea there is executives from across departments were able to meet, gather, talk about NPS trends on a monthly basis, and then use that and turn that into a growth driver to really create change internally and externally outside of their organization. And they're using this model for other things even outside of NPS now.
I love that, the NPS Council. I'd love to be on our NPS Council. That is very cool. Thank you so much to both of you. I have learned a ton, not only about how to build effective CX programs, but great examples and stories of how existing accounts and different types of customers have built those types of programs and tied those back into their ROI and communicating that information to their C-suite. Jon and Alli, this has been such an informative webinar. Again, if you have any questions, please submit those on the portal. It looks like we already have a question. Are there going to be any visuals of reports or tools? We didn't include those. An example of the website feedback and hidden actions would be great. I tell you what, I will commit that we will send out information like that to all of the attendees. I think that's a great idea. And I'd kind of like to take a look at those reports myself. I think that was a pretty cool, especially being a marketing person. Looks like we have some more questions. How do you convince the C-suite that CX programs are really worth investing in? How do you communicate that value to the leaders and the others in the organization? Jon, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, happy to. So I think first is understanding where these senior stakeholders are coming from. What's the language they're speaking? What are their motivations? What are the KPIs that matter most to them? Once you understand that and those key pieces, I think that's when you can then translate, as we talked a little bit about before, but translate CX metrics into the metrics that matter to them. And then together, getting their buy-in, create a plan that already somewhat fits into the overall company strategy. So you're not totally reinventing the wheel, but you're fitting CX at a deeper level of customer understanding, customer voice, into some of the culture that already exists at your company.
Very interesting. Here's another question. I'm going to give this one to you, Alli. What are some of the traits you see in leaders who are both successful and unsuccessful CX leaders? I'm sure you have worked with many of both.
Yes, there are definitely some important traits. So that's a great question. I think the biggest thing in making a successful CX leader is someone who really cares about what the customer wants. You have to understand that listening to the customer is really going to make the biggest impact on the business. So a lot of people focus on those financial metrics. But someone who listens more than talks and is an effective communicator and really hears what those customers want will realize that taking that information will actually tie directly to those financial metrics and make the biggest impact on your business.
Very interesting. And again, just one last reminder, if you have any other questions you would like to submit, just submit those through the portal. Give it a second. I haven't seen any others come through. So again, I want to thank Jon and Alli. This has been so informative, and I work with both of you every day, but I have learned so much about what you do in your departments that absolutely not only fuels what Alchemer does, but also fuels what our customers do. And this has been amazing. For the people on the call, thank you so much for joining us, and we will send you that additional information and those reports. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.